Hi, and welcome to the Path of Self-Love School. My name is Christina Rilo, and I'm the founder of the Path of Self-Love School. And I'm going to invite you to have a seat here with me on the couch, if you will, to talk about one of the most self-sabotaging habits that I see so many women, men too, but especially women, get stuck in. It is the habit of staying in unhealthy and unhappy relationships with your mate, with the people you date, with your friends, with your family. It's so prevalent. And when I wrote my first book, Choosing Me Before We, I did so for two reasons. Number one, I almost married the wrong person for all of the wrong reasons because I lacked self-love and I didn't even know what that was. If you had met me back then, I was happy. I looked happy anyway. I had a good job. I had a lot of friends. But I was settling in a relationship that was emotionally, spiritually unfulfilling, and in many ways was stopping me from being in the life I truly desired. And once I realized that was a lack of self-love that was causing me to be in this self-sabotaging habit and pattern that kept me going back, kept me staying in that relationship, plus even a lot of friendships that were the same. I see people do this even in their jobs. I had no idea it was a lack of self-love. So one of the reasons we do these short video sessions, which from the Path of Self-Love School, is to illuminate that these self-sabotaging habits that you might not even know are connected to a lack or weak self-love, so that it can give you some tools and some practices that actually get to the root. You see, I saw after I got this, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have a lot of self-esteem. I really do have confidence, but I lack self-respect. I lack self-honor. I lack self-trust. I lack self-empowerment, especially when it comes to my relationships. The light bulbs started going off for me. And then I started looking around at all my really amazing girlfriends, smart, educated, beautiful, talented, in relationships in which they were toxic, or they would leave the toxic relationship and then they would, pick Jackass 2.0 and 3.0, or they would just not be able to have relationships at all. And so we got to do something about that. And that's where Choosing Me Before We came from, which is a big foundation at the Path of Self-Love School. And one of the things I never learned when I was getting my MBA or on any on-the-job training is that there's real reasons why you stay stuck in unhealthy and unhappy things. Relationships. Now, I could talk to you for a long time about this. I mean, we run full courses at the Path of Self-Love on this. But for today, I wanted to give you a snippet, something that you can really work with to help you understand where in your relationship you might be settling, you might be lying to yourself, and why you might be lying to yourself about it. It's one of the biggest things I see is women especially lying to themselves about what's really going on in their relationships. So first, let me just draw you a picture and show you why we overstay in unhealthy and unhappy relationships. So when you were born, your heart was like this. Big, beautiful, magenta heart, full, whole, so excited to come into this world and be like, I am so excited to be here. I'm going to love people. They're going to love me. It's going to be amazing. And you were this big, huge, open heart. And then you met someone who was here for longer than you. And that love, pure, innocent, divine, amazing love, was met by fear or shame or blame or hurt or criticism. And what happened is a love crack happened. A fissure, a crack in this beautiful heart. And these happen early in our lives. They can happen as early as 2 weeks. That's when I got my first one. I've seen it happen, as early as a year, 2 years, 3 years, 11 years. They can happen at any time, but especially when we're young. And so when that happens, what happens is this in this moment, instead of all that love being pure love, this is the moment where fear comes in or shame comes in. And it takes up residence. It builds a condo kind of in your house, in your heart. And because you don't know how to protect yourself, that part of you that wants to protect yourself, I like to call it the inner mean girl, it says to yourself, I don't ever want that to happen again. And so it makes up things that are based on an emotional intelligence of a 3-year-old, a 2-week-old, a 5-year-old, that then you spend your whole life protecting yourself from, the very thing you want most. And what happens a lot is we find relationships that are not always healthy, and we don't want to have to feel the fear or the shame or the blame or the disappointment, and so we fill in these love cracks with people. My ex-person, and he was like stuck in there. He was like way in there. His family was in there. And it feels more painful to take these people out of the love crack, because then you got to deal with this big emptiness that's inside of your heart. And we rather would just deal with the toxic relationships or the disappointments or how people don't show up and match our potential, or they just can't be the people we want them to be. We just keep doing it, and it's like continuing to stab yourself in a sore, kind of like, when you get dental work, it's like sticking your tongue in that same sore over and over and over again. But when we have self-love, and when you know how to use self-love to actually make shift happen here, you can take these people out of your love cracks, and then what you do is you fill in the love crack with your own love, and with divine love, and with love from other people. Now, that's a whole class and a whole teaching, but I wanted you to just get an idea of why it is that it's so hard to break this self-sabotaging pattern of staying in unhealthy and unhappy relationships. And it takes time. But the first step is actually getting honest with yourself. I'll say that one more time. The first step is actually getting honest with yourself. So I'm going to bring you back to the couch here with me, and we're going to have a little talk. And I'm going to take you through a very short self-love practice, which is called the self-love honesty hearing. Because the thing that I see over and over and over again about why people go back, why they stay stuck in friendships or beloveds or even jobs, is because they're not being honest with themselves. You ready? All right, let's head back to the couch. Okay, so here's the thing about self-love. It is a practice, and it is a path, and it is a choice. And there are real things that we can do. It's taken me 10 years to test and experiment and figure out how to actually get into the heart and make some of these shift happens. One of the big reasons we don't make shift happen in our lives, especially when it comes to our relationships, is that we're working at the head level, working at the mental level. And this, beloved, is a matter of the heart. So I'm going to open up this chapter to the chapter. This is my second book, Madly in Love with Me, which is the basis for our Self-Love Foundations class, which teaches the 10 different branches of self-love, one of which is self-awareness and self-honesty. And in this book, there are all these different practices that we do, and also different exercises. This one specifically, we have to call them daring acts of love, is called an honesty hearing. So we're just going to do a short version of it here with me. And if you have a piece of paper, this would be great for you to journal on. And if not, you can just follow around with me. So I want you to go ahead and presence a relationship that you have in your life right now that's challenging, where you're not getting your needs met. And maybe it could also be a previous one where you're still having some guilt or some fear or some shame or some regret about. And just presence that relationship. And by that I mean presence yourself, presence the other person, and presence the relationship between the two of you. And then I want you to ask yourself this question: what are all the ways that you haven't been honest with yourself about who this person is, about what the state and reality of your relationship is, and about how you show up and your part in this, and what's keeping you here and settling? And just jot a couple things down, and you're going to feel this in your heart. Here's the thing about self-love. This is why people want the easy solution. We always say self-love gets to the root. It's at the root of every challenge and struggle we have is usually a weak or lack of self-love. Because you got to get in here, and it's uncomfortable, and I get that. Honey, I totally get that. But if you can't be honest with yourself and look at this and say, okay, where am I not being honest about the relationship, about this person? I see so many people date and mate and marry the potential of someone versus who that person actually is, and make up stories about a relationship that aren't actually true. Stop it. From a place of deep love for yourself, how would you, if you were giving that advice to a person you loved and you saw them doing it, do that same thing for yourself in this moment? So be honest about that. Number 2, go deeper with yourself. And I'm going to ask you a series of questions. So if you look at those truths there, the things that you're not being honest about, ask yourself this question. If you look at those, what consequence am I afraid of? What consequence are you afraid of? If you accept these things as true, what reality will you have to face that you might not want to? What reality might you have to face that you might not want to? Little gulp there. Yeah, consequence of actually admitting the truth. That's the hardest part about self-honesty, because it's going to require you to take some self-loving, self-supportive, self-empowering actions that won't be comfortable. But what's more important, beloved, your comfortability or your happiness and your health and your well-being and your wholeness? I go with the second part. And then the third question, what's the reality? What's the cost of this lack of self-honesty? So you look at the consequence, ask yourself, what's the cost to you of this lack of self-honesty? What's it costing you? I'm not going to leave you here. Just take another breath. But we're getting into the heart. Can you feel it? Just let yourself touch that and really look at it. This is how we strengthen and get to that deeper place of self-love, because if you loved yourself as much as you would love a girlfriend, a boyfriend, a sister, a brother, a child who was staying in an unhealthy relationship or job, you would do what you would do for them. I want you to do it for yourself. And you got to let yourself feel the pain and feel the reality. Don't stay here. Touch it. And here's where self-empowerment comes in. What reality would you like to create instead? Not about the person, not about the relationship, about you. What is the reality you want to create for yourself? And whether that's you're talking about romantic relationships or friendships or job, what's the reality you want in these kinds of relationships? And be willing to claim it and write it down. Say it out loud right now. What I desire is what? And then close your eyes. Put your hand on your heart. I want you to hear these words, beloved. You are sacred. You deserve to have only loving, respectful relationships. And only you can make that choice. So if you were to take a promise to only have loving, respectful relationships, and if you were to believe that you truly are sacred, which you are, and that respect is not an upgrade, but mandatory, and that you do deserve to have the kinds of relationships you desire, what one action could you take to start creating this reality right now? One small but mighty step. And ask your inner wisdom. If you don't get anything because you haven't been talking to your inner wisdom, talking to our inner wisdom is a huge foundational piece of self-love. Just ask yourself, if my best friend was in this situation, what would be one thing I would say to her? Do this one thing. Or him, do this one thing. And just take one step. And just even doing this honesty hearing and starting to see what's really happening and accepting it and being aware of it is absolutely part of it. And we're just opening this up. Second vow of self-love is I only have loving, respectful relationships. It can take people a year, 2 years, 3 years to really get that into place. But this is where it starts. One of the things that we do with the Path of Self-Love is all about creating a strong inner foundation. I gave you a way to open it up. And I invite you to come and check out what we're up to at the Path of Self-Love School, where we have ways to actually make these transformations in your heart. One of the ways that we love to do this, especially in our Self-Love Foundations classes, every month we take on a new mantra. And this is the mantra, and I'm going to open this up, see if we can have you see this. This is one of the first pieces of heart art that I made. It says there in the corner, you are sacred. And so I invite you every morning, one of my favorite self-love practices is that helps create a strong foundation of self-love, a self-love soak. Every morning, just saying to yourself, I am sacred. I am sacred. I am sacred. And as you put that energy into your own heart, you'll start to believe it and you'll start to feel it. Self-love is a practice. Self-love is a path. Self-love is a choice. And it starts with self-honesty when it comes to our relationships. So glad to be with you for this mini session. And come on over to thepathofselflove.org. We have lots going on, and we'd love to have you. Much love, everyone. See you soon.